Did you leave that restaurant wanting to hurt anyone?
No.
Why did you do it?
I don't know. If I knew, I would tell you.
The teenager charged with an unspeakable crime, murder, attempted murder, and biting at the face of one of his victims.
Hello, I'm Michael. Today we are going to talk about killers who ate their victims. Vampire of Sacramento. There is a lot to say about Richard, but the name says it all. Richard Chase was always thirsty for blood. To calm this urge, he would pick up animals from the street, strangle them, cut them, and then use a blender to mix them with Coca-Cola. He was as vile as a serial killer could be, but how did he become like that? He developed hypochondria, a condition where a person is unduly worried about his health. He was on a murder spree, as he killed his first victim in a drive-by shooting, and the last, a 38-year-old woman, by mutilating her, and then engaging in necrophilia and cannibalism. On January 23, 1978, he broke into a house and shot Teresa Wallen, who was 3 months pregnant at the time. He shot her 3 times. He then had sexual intercourse with the corpse while stabbing her with a butcher's knife. He removed multiple organs, cut off one of her nipples, and drank her blood. Richard Chase was given the name Dracula when he was admitted in a psychiatric ward and learned about his blood fixation. His cellmates feared upon him coming to know of his gruesome crimes. He was sentenced to die in a gas chamber, but he overdosed in his cell, resulting in his death. The Vampire of Sacramento was extremely wicked, evil, and vile. Zhang Yongming. Zhang Yongming was a Chinese cannibal who sold the meat of his victims in the market, calling it ostrich meat. Zhang, with his cannibal instincts, killed 11 men later butchered as they were eaten and fed to dogs. He was arrested earlier on for international homicide and was sentenced to death. This was in 1979. The sentence was reduced and he was released in September 1997. Later, after many years, a missing report of a 19-year-old man was lodged. There was a rumor that a serial killer was on the loose in Yunnan province. The murder was near Zhang's house. Zhang was searched and the cops found an eyeball, skin, and other body parts hung up in his residence. The neighbors vouched that he used to carry plastic bags with protruding bones in them. He wasn't arrested, but that didn't affect him. He felt no remorse. He ate the body, scraped the skin, and hung up the body parts of his victims. He was executed on the 10th of January, 2013. Andrei Chikatilo. The Rostov butcher, or Chikatilo, was born on the 16th of October, 1936, in the Ukrainian SSR. His youngest victim was a 7-year-old boy. He killed 52 women, had a trial with cameras, and was a cannibal. How does one become a cannibal? For the sake of your own mental health, please don't go searching that question on the internet. Let's just take the case of Chikatilo and try and understand this. He was a famine victim in Ukraine under the rule of Joseph Stalin. Due to the famine in the country, his older brother Stefan was kidnapped and cannibalized by the starving neighbors. That isn't the answer, though, because what makes him a cannibal is a mystery. But we do concur with the fact that there is a step-by-step progress towards the intense nature of the crime. 53 of them were either sexually assaulted, raped, beaten, or cooked. After his arrest, he confessed his passion for a crime that was unimaginable to the authorities. He scraped the eyes off his later victims. He would tell his victims that he enjoyed the smell of the blood. His sexual gratification came from an act that is vile, evil, and demonic for many. He was sentenced to death with 86 years for 53 murders and 5 sexual assaults. Hamilton Howard Albert Fish. Albert Fish was an American child slayer, molester, rapist, and serial killer in the late 19th century and early 20th century. He took great joy in killings, molesting and raping young children, mostly boys of some disability or African American descent, and he did all of that with a smile on his face. He enjoyed the pain he saw and inflicted it on himself, too, a sadomasochist in all sincerity. He was arrested for his dark deed through a letter that was traced back to him. The letter was for the parents of his victim, case in point, Grace Budd. The 10-year-old Grace Budd was taken on the pretense of a birthday party for Albert's niece. This was unusual, as he thought on his feet when his eyes laid on Grace. Grace wasn't his first choice. Her elder brother Edward was. The parents were convinced the night Grace left and never returned. Fish took her to an abandoned house where she was molested, tied, hung, killed, cooked, roasted, baked, and then eaten for 9 straight days. On his arrest, he claimed to have killed a girl in every state of the country. And this was in the 1930s when he was arrested and confessed to having done everything that the letter mentioned in gruesome detail with a smile on his face. So what did the letter contain? The letter was a crucial part of the crime, where it said that a killer would often revisit the act in some or the other form. Here, the killer communicates the act to the parents of the victim, detailing what he had done. In the case of Grace Budd, the killer developed the idea of cooking her and eating her from the first time he laid eyes on her. He did mention that he didn't sexually assault her, but wished he did. She died a virgin. It was chilling then and is chilling now to even say it out loud. This is beyond abnormal, where there are deep-rooted issues within the Fish family. It is a verifiable fact that the generations before Albert were all mentally unstable. The gray man was executed while strapped to an electric chair, but the name struck, and the story is still chilling. Leonarda Cianciulli. Imagine a pot simmering in heat as the liquid boils, with caustic soda to create soap. The other pot has a liquid that is simmering and then is baked to make the cake. The soap was sold and the cake was given to people to eat, only they never knew it was made out of the blood and meat of 3 women of Italy. Let me introduce Leonarda Cianciulli, born in Montella from Italy on the 18th of April, 1894. She worked till she got married, had a clerical job, married the man she wanted, and had kids. She wasn't accepted by her mother and was cursed for life for marrying someone else. Now Leonarda Cianciulli was superstitious and held that fear within herself. She had 17 pregnancies during her marriage. She lost 3 in miscarriage, 10 died in infancy, and the rest of the 4 children she protected with all she had. Here's where the story gets interesting. She goes to a fortune teller to keep things under control. The fortune teller says, "In your right hand I see prison, and in your left I see a criminal asylum." Well, that was a very specific telling of fortune. In 1939, Leonarda learned that her eldest son was going to join the Italian army in preparation for World War II. She was rather apprehensive about the fact. She did what any mother would do and prayed for his safety, but that didn't stop there. To protect the life of her eldest son, she felt she had to sacrifice a human life. So she chose the 3 ladies in her neighborhood. Faustina Setti, Francesca Soavi, and Virginia Cacioppo were lured into her home, given something drugged to eat or drink, and later were murdered with an axe by Leonarda. The first 2 women were enticed with an offer of getting a better living somewhere by Leonarda, a job preferably better than what they had. The 3rd woman, Virginia, was a singer, and she was cooked in a pot, as her flesh was fat and white. Leonarda added cologne to the pot for a better smell. The other 2 women were cooked in a pot and later served as tea cakes for Leonarda's guest and herself. Apparently, she really liked the taste of their flesh. A bar of soap and a cake, that is what they were brought down to. The soap was sold and the cake was fed, only later to be exposed as murder weapons. Virginia's sister was worried about her absence and she complained. Leonarda was caught. She was found guilty of her crimes and sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum. Joachim Kroll. This story might seem like a David Fincher flick if I do my job right. Another cannibal who was from Germany, not just a cannibal, but also a necrophile, child molester, and serial killer, was called Joachim Kroll. He was the 6th of 9 children. His arrest was simple, but it took the cops 12 murders to get there. His neighborhood called the cops when there was a blockage in the pipe. It was a wooden house, with the sound of a simmering vessel overheat. The neighbor asked what was blocking the pipeline, to which he replied it was the guts. His neighbor called the cops, and when they entered, they saw Marion Ketter, a 4-year-old child, being cooked. His first victim was a 19-year-old girl who was raped, stabbed to death, and disemboweled. He had a distinct method that he tried on every victim of his. He would kill his victims in the same place, though on some occasions years apart. He evaded his arrest as there were other killers of that particular time on the block who were blamed for it. He would surprise his victims, strangling them, undressing them, having sexual intercourse with them, and then mutilating them to be eaten later. He was arrested on the 3rd of July when the neighbors complained. Upon their arrival, the cops found Marion Ketter cut up into pieces stored in a fridge. a small hand cooking in a pan of boiling water, and the guts stuck in the pipeline. The killer was arrested and later gave details of all 13 murders he committed. The details are often too barbaric to even describe. He said that he used to slice portions of the flesh of his victims and would cook and eat them. He did that to save grocery bills. Hunger and poverty took over the mind of a man who was already vile. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and died of a heart attack in 1991. Issei Sagawa. Issei Sagawa was privileged at his birth, as he had a wealthy family to take care of him. When he was born, he was small enough to fit in the palms of his father. Who was Issei Sagawa? Issei Sagawa was born into a wealthy family. His father was the president of Kurita Water Industries, and his grandfather was an editor for the fourth largest newspaper in Japan. He was known as the Kobe Cannibal and was treated as a celebrity when he was in Japan. The story is very interesting, as the urge to commit such vile acts started when he was in the first grade. His premature birth led his body to be timid, facing malnutrition. By the time of youth, he was involved in the act of bestiality with his dog. His eyes hooked onto the thighs of a male teacher, and the urge to eat the flesh grew in him. He was insignificant in his physicality and always felt insecure about his appearance. At the age of 24, when he was at Waco University, Tokyo, he followed a German woman and later broke into her house, intending to eat her buttocks. He was knocked onto the ground by the woman and later charged with an attempt to rape. Whatever could save him was used in the end. The wealth that his father had exerted its influence. He didn't stop there. When he was sent to France to study for his Ph.D., he called one of his classmates on the pretense of poetry translation. She was Dutch and 5 feet 10 inches tall. He killed her with a rifle, and shaken by the act himself, fell to the floor. He woke up to realize that he had to complete the whole act, so he performed necrophilia and later went out to bring the butcher's knife. He either ate the body parts raw, cooked, or stored it in the fridge for later use. He was caught by the French cops when he was trying to dispose of the remains of the Dutch woman's body. The courtroom in France found him legally insane, and he was sent to a medical institution. He was sent to Tokyo, where he was declared sane, however, with sexual perversions. The worst part is that he is now free, age 73, helped by his brother as he is immobile. Hadden Clark. Here comes another cannibal, Hadden Clark. What sets him apart is his vile urge to kill and drink blood. Clark didn't plan on killing anyone initially, but then he did end up killing a little girl. She was Michelle Dorr, a 6-year-old friend of Clark's niece. Before the murder, before becoming cannibal, before being vile, Hadden Clark suffered from paranoia. He was homeless, hungry, and lived for most of his life on the streets. His parents were alcoholics and toxic people who would fight in front of Hadden when he was a child. His mother would dress him up like a girl when drunk. While homeless, Clark knocked on the door of his elder brother, who let him stay for a while and then told him to move out. In that span of time, a 6-year-old came in to see his niece. Michelle was stabbed and her blood was drunk that day. He stuffed Michelle in the bag and then buried her 12 miles away. Clark didn't stop there. His next victim was 23-year-old Laura. How would he get onto her, you ask? Clark entered through the back door, took the kitchen knife, and stabbed Laura, and later suffocated her with a pillow. He buried her a mile away. Clark later went to her house, dressed up in Laura's clothing, and exited through the main door. He didn't stop there either. He had a garden that belonged to his grandfather. He used to bury some body parts of his victims there. It was a sinister garden of souvenirs. The police found items of jewelry in the garden, but how did they find them? The pillow cover had the fingerprints that led to him. This was the cover of the pillow that was used to suffocate Laura. He later took the cops to the sites where he buried Laura and Michelle. Armin Meiwes is not a serial killer, but is rather a cannibal. He is different from the rest of the lot in many ways. He asked for the consent of his victims, since his victims had a fetish, and then they were cooked. What makes Armin Meiwes different? He was a computer technician who put an advertisement online. The ad read, looking for a normally built 18 to 25-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed. It was live on Cannibal Forum, the Cannibal Cafe. Bernd Brandes responded to the ad. He was from Berlin. Many other people responded to the advertisement but backed out. Meiwes did not attempt to force them to do anything against their will. From here on, the details are gruesome and graphic. The two met on the 9th of March 2001 at Meiwes' home. The two men discussed eating Brandon's penis, either by cooking it raw or just biting it off. Brandon swallowed some sleeping pills and cough syrup. His penis was cut off by Meiwes with a knife and cooked with salt, pepper, wine, and garlic. Meiwes didn't think it was enough, so it was fried further with Brandis' fat and charred. Finally, the dog ate the penis. Brandis by now was very weak with the loss of blood. Meiwes read a Star Trek book as he lay in the bathtub. After long hesitation and prayers, Meiwes stabbed him in the throat and hung his body on a meat hook. Meiwes ate the body over 10 months, storing it in the freezer and eating 20 kilograms of flesh. And oh, did I mention that he was recording all the activities they were involved in? Yes, there is a 4-hour videotape of the said act, unreleased. A college student tipped the cops on the website activity, the Cannibal Cafe. Meiwes was arrested in December 2002 and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Austin Harrouff is the youngest on the list, and the last one we're going to talk about. He was 19 when he killed a human being. But how did a 19-year-old convince himself to convict such a gruesome deed? Austin was born on the 21st of December 1996. He was a frat boy who played football. He lived with his mother and sister. His parents were divorced during this time. It was 2016 when the cops found Austin eating the face of a man named John Stevens. Austin wasn't eating his face, but was rather chewing it off. John Stevens and his wife, Michelle Miscon, were both beaten, stabbed, and chewed. When the cops arrived at the scene, Austin was growling like a dog. He had an argument that night with his father and had no memory of his actions. He is 25 now and awaiting his trial. With this, we conclude this episode of Killers Who Ate Their Victims, or Cannibals. If you liked the video, do like, share, and subscribe. See you next time for more creepy cases of killers.